Okay, second part of the cockpit preparation video. Co-pilot's still outside doing the outside check, and I'm going to get the plane ready. Usually when there's two of you in the cockpit, the responsibility on all these panels is split. Co-pilot is doing most of the work, fortunately, but since I don't really have one, just imagining one, my imaginative friend, so to say, I have to do everything by myself. And what you want to do, I'll turn the dome light to bright again, so see stuff a little better, is you check the emergency equipment. There's a crash axe right here. You want to have that one, obviously, to fend off any invaders to the cockpit. No, not really, but we like to think of that sometimes. And of course, here's this flashlight. We have the oxygen mask. You want to check the pressure. You want to check the microphone, that it works correctly. The sun visors in here. Later on, we might have a little flap up here where the cockpit escape rope is. And as you're done with the side wall, you basically move through a certain pattern in the cockpit, and we go from up to down and from left to right. So you obviously start with the aft overhead panel. Let's move out a little bit so we can see that a little better. This is the aft overhead panel. You can basically imagine certain rows that you want to walk down, and I do that. I check that the service interphone is off. I have the dome light used already. I'm just testing the lights here for the leading edge device indication. Stall warning, the so-called stick shaker. One for the captain, one for the co-pilot. Now this is another thing you want to accomplish early. That's getting the IRS aligned. You just move it to nav. There's a short on DC power on test, and then it starts aligning. And that takes about 13 minutes. You can follow along if you move the position or the display selector to heading status. That shows the minutes remaining in this case. It starts with 7 for some odd reason. I don't know why they did it. And as the real time remaining goes below 7, the number starts decreasing accordingly. And of course you have a switch to determine which system you're indicating. You have two IRS systems for redundancy, and of course to compare them during flight in case one starts showing a bank and the other one isn't. That would show up immediately. Okay, let's move over to the next row. You have the flight recorder. Guard should be closed. Light, in this case, actually it should be still shining because the engines aren't running. We will probably fix that in the final version. You have the Mach airspeed test. We call it the clacker. It's when you go into overspeed. It makes these kind of sounds. Engine warning panel, everything's off. Crew oxygen is plenty, that's fine, and of course you could turn on the passenger oxygen if you flip that switch to on. All the masks will come down, big mess, flight will be cancelled, so let's not do that. Secondary gear indication showing green. It's basically a copy of the primary gear indication, but it comes off of different sensors, so in case you get a weird indication on one of these, the other one shows 3 green, then you're good. Now start moving to the main overhead panel. Again, I'm moving into a more comfortable position so I can scroll through these real nicely. You have the flight control switches. They should be closed. Everything's fine. Alternate flap system. You can turn on the yaw damper right now. It works with the hydraulic power. Make sure these switches are in the middle. You would only need them during malfunctions. Here you turn on all the fuel tanks, fuel pumps for tanks that contain fuel. If you glance down on the fuel indicator, you see that the center tank is empty. Outside wing tanks, the wing tanks have 3,500 kilograms each, enough for the flight to New York. So you would want to only turn on the pumps for the wing tanks. And of course the engines will run even if the pumps are off, so don't give me any bug reports about that. But you need positive pressure, and they might deteriorate in thrust at high altitude, so of course you want to have the pumps on. You can also balance fuel with pump pressure and the crossfeed, but I'll explain that later on. Next row. We already played here with the electrical system. Right now we're on ground power because that's what's supplying the aircraft. A very important switch right here, galley power. Turn it on so the ladies can start working on the coffee. Very important in the early morning. Electrical system again, of course, the low pressure lights are on for the generators because they're not turning and they need to turn with the engines. to generate that oil pressure. Down here again we have the ground power switch. We use that. The generator off bus light is on. That means the generators are not powering the buses. They can't because they turn with the engines and are not turning yet. APU system down here, we will get that started very soon because it is cold in the cabin. We'll get to the temperature in a second. And the ladies are already complaining, and if they're not happy, I don't get any coffee, and then I am not happy. These are the equipment cooling, supply, exhaust, alternate and normal configuration. You would leave them in normal 99% of the time. Only in certain electrical malfunctions you would use the alternate position. Emergency exit lights, we tested already this morning. You want to have them on armed so they come on automatically in case one of the DC buses loses power. Of course we want everyone to sit down, so no smoking, fasten seatbelts on. We have these ones here, call the attendants. And of course they're not going to respond very happy while they're still cold, so this is the ground call. It's a very loud call, the horn in the nose wheel well to alert the ground crew that you want something. Nobody seems to know what it means, so I buzz that sometimes and no one ever replies, but it's there anyway. Wiper switches, we're not going to use these right now. The windows are dry and that would just scratch them up. The window heat we turn on already because the windows need to heat up about 10 minutes before we start flying to get them warm and flexible. And the pitot-static we leave off. It's a very powerful heaters. You can make them, the pitot-static tubes glow in the dark because they get so hot, so Boeing says only use them when you taxi out to get at least a little air flowing over them. Of course they are heated very high so they don't get any icing during flight because that would really screw up your speed indication, and that's not a good thing. Wing anti-ice, engine anti-ice system, don't need it right now. It's a beautiful bright day. And talked about the hydraulic power already. Of course the engine pumps still show low pressure even though they're turned on. The engines aren't turning, no power there. These are the door lights. Of course they're all off right now. The cockpit voice recorder. This is part of the pressurization system. Right now you can see differential pressure is at 0. Cabin, climb, descent rate is at 0 as well. We don't pressurize the cabin at all. Let's see what they're complaining about. The passenger cabin temperature is obviously below 0. Of course, that would not make me happy either. So we need to start getting some air going. We could turn on the recirculation fans. They are just driven by electricity, just fans that recirculate the cabin air. As I turn that, you can hear air starts flowing gently. Of course it's cold air, so that's not going to make anyone really happy, so we have to get the APU going in a second here. Let's finish the overhead panel first. We want to fly at, let's see what the flight plan says. Flight plan says 27,000 feet for the flight, and of course New York is pretty much at sea level, so we're just going to put this to 10 feet here. Check that it's on auto. There are different modes here, standby, and also you can use work the outflow valve manually in AC and DC mode, but that's something for abnormals as well. Down here we can turn off the wheel well light. Co-pilot is done with the outside check. We're going to leave the position light on for now. Let's see ignition start. That's the ignition system for the engines. We like to have that odd days on the left, even days on the right, and that way if one of them fails you can find out and have maintenance fix that. Move over here the outside lights. We don't turn them on the ground while we're getting ready unless we want to test them. Usually it really makes the ground crew mad if they're staring at the airplane and you flash these on because they are very powerful, so we just leave them off. Okay, before I move to the main panel, the crew's really getting angry, so let's start on the APU. Before you turn on the APU, any good pilot will check the fire warning system, and we're doing that as well. Let's move to a little better vantage point here. Okay, we have the test switch here on the left. First we test the fault in-op system that would detect a fault all by itself, and that seems to be working. If you look up, you can also see the overhead detection light up. If I let go, it extinguishes again. And of course then there's the fire test. We move it to the right. You want to see all these lights down here, overheat lights, fire warning lights, wheel well, and of course you want to see red lights up here, and as I let go they extinguish again. While we're testing the fire's extinguishing system, we also test to see if the discharge system is connected, and you can test that moving the switch to left and right, and you will get the bottle discharge lights. That works good. Here's the test for the cargo detection suppression system. And again, that shows the fire lights and master caution. So that works again. Okay, fine. We can now turn on the APU. Move down again. I like to use the mouse while I move around. When I fly, I use the track IR, but for getting ready, the mouse is nicer, because when I let it go, the view is not moving anymore. So I turn on the APU, and of course when I do that, you will see that the lights connected to the battery bus are dimming a little bit, because when the APU starts, the electrical charging power to the battery is disconnected, because there's a very high load on the electrical system, and the battery is able to carry this load on its own the best. So let's start the APU, move to on, and then briefly to start, let go. And if you look at the lights, you can see them dimming. It takes a second for the starter to kick in. The inlet door needs to open first. EGT goes up, it peaks, comes back down, and in a second you will see the APU avail light, APU generator off bus light it is really called, and it of course shows us that we can now connect the APU generator to the buses. On the ground you can use the APU to power both buses, so we'll do that now. First the left one, then the right one, and of course you see that the amps on the APU go up pretty high, because of course the APU has to carry both generator buses now. Now that we have the APU running, usually we wait a minute or two so it can heat up before we place too much demand on it, but while we wait, I'm going to call the ground staff again. And now one looks up, wonders what's going on. I give him the sign to disconnect the ground power, so we don't have to wait for that later on when we want to go. And I say disconnect ground power, and of course the light comes off. There's no more ground power. As you see, the switch is still on ground power, no more electricity. Place it to APU generator right now, and that one seems to be working nicely. Okay, time to get the air going. You can see it did warm up a little bit in the cabin. We're at 6 degrees, still not acceptable. So let's turn the APU bleed on. You see the duct pressure rise, and still no air is flowing into the cabin because both packs are still off. We have the dual bleed light on. That means there could be bleed from the engines rushing back into the APU, because we have both of these switches on. If I turn this one off, and of course, so I need to close this one. This means now no air could go from engine 2 to the APU, and the dual bleed light goes off. I turn this on, now it would be possible from engine 1 to get air into the APU. It's a back pressure warning light, so to say. It's okay on the ground, it's okay with the engines in idle, but you of course get a master caution for that we need to cancel. Okay, 14 minutes of rambling already. Let's get some air flowing real quick, and then I will start the third part of this getting ready video. On the ground we're only supposed to use one pack when using the APU. It places a high load on the APU, and I will turn on the pack in a second. You can see the EGT is 200, 300, 400 about, and as I turn that pack on, first you hear the sound, you see the duct pressure go down a little bit, and of course the EGT goes up because the APU has to strain to keep the pressure going. Okay, now let's see what the temperature indication is doing. We will place these two on normal, and of course the passenger's cabin is not going to warm up so fast. Let's see what the supply duct is doing. You can see the temperature creep up. Not as fast as you'd expect, because the recirculation fan is mixing cold air from the cabin back into the airflow. If I turn that off, You can see that now the temperature in the supply duct is actually getting a lot warmer, and sometimes you can smell that in the morning when the temperature goes up really high. These ducts are made out of plastic, and they smell like they're going to burn up in a second. So I'm going to turn on the recirculation fan on again. That drops the temperature a little bit, and we're already at almost 10 degrees, so it should warm up fairly soon. Okay, this concludes the second video, and I'm going to start with the third one and final one of getting this plane ready in a second.